Hey, before we get our interview with Drake Reiter from Drake University started, I wanted to talk to you about the free book that's available on Monday, January 13th, 2020, called Residency Interview Help in Case of Interview Invitation Break Glass. There were a number of kind of pearls or things that maybe you don't think about, like make sure after the interview that you let them know you're interested. Because they don't know, just as you don't know, where they're going to rank, and you're not actually even allowed to tell them, hey, I rank you number one, or they're not allowed to tell you, we rank you number one. So you can get that free. Just go to the link in this episode, or go to Amazon and go to Residency Interview Help. You can find it there. And it's a little bit goofy, but don't hit the Kindle 0.00 Kindle Unlimited, but you want to go underneath to get it 0.00 to buy if you don't have Kindle Unlimited. But again, a flash interview is kind of what prompted this. A flash interview is when they interview you and say, hey, we would like you to interview for the position. You email back and say you're interested, and then they call you right back immediately and start the interview. And I know how some people would feel about that, but again, this is kind of the name of the game these days with so many, around probably 8,000, I think, applying for the 4,000 positions. And what I think many programs are trying to do is get past just a written application and trying to get just a little bit of a sense of who you are and what you can do, and try to do it in a way that they can also manage their jobs, because there is no residency director job that is just that job. It's another thing that they have to do on top of their already probably very busy workload. So again, here is the interview with Drake Reiter, one of the students of distinction at Drake University. We talk a lot about leadership as one of the top 5 qualities that you want to have when going into residency. But he's such a humble guy, such a neat guy. I think you'll really enjoy it and get a lot out of it. Don't forget to sign up on residencyhelp.com for our email list, so you can always make sure to get invitations for free books and other things that I tend to send out. Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I am on with Drake Reiter from Keokuk, Iowa. He is a P4 at Drake University, and we're going to talk about his involvement, a couple of the awards and honors he's had. But what we really want to do is kind of nail down the things that you should be working on, maybe as a student or even as a P4, as we're going through the interview process. So Drake, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast.
Thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're an Iowan who went to Drake. My wife went all the way from Ankeny, Iowa, all the way down to Drake, so an 18-minute drive. But tell me a little bit about what made you stay in town. Well, not in town, but in state.
Yeah. So, like you said, I am from Iowa originally. Didn't really know that I wanted to do pharmacy at first. So I ended up going to a smaller school in kind of west central Illinois, which is closer to my hometown. For the first couple years, I went in as a pre-pharmacy major, ended up really enjoying a lot of the science classes, and ended up getting a part-time job in the summer with pharmacy close to my hometown as well. Just so happened that all of the pharmacists there went to Drake. So they spoke very highly of the university. They had a lot of good things to say. And so I was really influenced a lot by them. As well as the fact that it was one of the 2 pharmacy schools in Iowa. So that's kind of how I came to that decision. I will say, in hindsight, it's definitely one of the better decisions I think I made for myself. I've made a lot of great connections at Drake and have just really enjoyed my time there overall.
Okay, so are you a transfer, or are you someone who went in as a freshman?
So I'm a transfer student, and a little bit of a unique transfer. So I still only did 2 years of pre-pharmacy, just the prerequisite courses, and took the PCAT, which I know a lot of the transfer students at Drake do the typical 4-year undergrad. But actually, those same pharmacists who I talked with kind of let me know that Drake is a 0 to 6. And so as long as I, kind of took care of those prereqs and stuff like that, I could still get in on more of an accelerated timeline. So I kind of went for that, and fortunately was able to do so.
Yeah, I think this is my own personal opinion, but I think 8 years is too much. if you're going to be doing a year or two of residency and fellowship. But I also think 5 years may be pretty fast, and I kind of always like that 6 years as a way to do it. I happened to do 7. That was only because I did 2 sophomore years, but that was my own deal. But you managed to do it, which it's actually very hard to do that in 2 years unless you're pretty focused, pretty driven. Can you tell me a little bit about where your drive comes from, or maybe your organization? Because knowing to do organic 1 and 2 as a sophomore is something that's pretty difficult, I think. So where did that come from, or has it always been with you?
Yeah, I think a lot of that for me. So I grew up in a little bit of a smaller town, which was good for me because I was, an athlete. So I got to do a lot of different activities.
Hmm.
My mom's also a teacher, so it was instilled in me very early on how important school was going to be. So I kind of always had that motivation to do well in school. And then with also being involved in a lot of sports and other activities, I think I learned very early on in high school just kind of how to manage my time. Um, and how to go about doing that. And then as far as once I got into college, it kind of the same continued. It was a little bit easier since I didn't have some of the extracurriculars going on. But I think just from very early on, learning those organizational skills, uh, sports and everything else kind of taught me, hard work and things like that are lessons that you learn pretty early on with that as well. So I think that's kind of where that came from. And just kind of learning to grow and adjust with that as kind of my activities and stuff changed.
Okay. And what I guess I was just so impressed with is that you're a transfer, yet you are still the president of your APHA ASP. You told me a little bit about that transition, but can you tell me how you got involved so quickly as a transfer? Because a lot of the people at Drake have known each other since they were freshmen, and then you came in and you ended up being the president. So I think that you actually probably had some it actually helps, I think, to be on the outside looking in sometimes. But how did you make that transition to president so quickly for with people that maybe have known each other a bit longer?
Yeah, that's actually, I have a lot of friends and other students who kind of tell me that as well. They didn't really realize I was a transfer at first. But yeah, I would say it was definitely difficult at first just because, like you said, everybody else, for the most part, knew one another for those first couple years. And here I was kind of coming in later into the game. And I kind of had to just start at the very basic level of going to the activity fairs and all of that sort of stuff in the fall semester of my P1 year. That was really just my commitment, saying I really wanted to be involved and explore as much as I can. I don't know a lot of other students, so I really just want to try to get connected and kind of find myself within pharmacy and see where I can go with that. And so that was really the first step. And then after that, it was kind of about, volunteering to help with different committees within APHA, going to as many meetings as I could just so that I got more exposure to different things and the ability to just talk with more students, to make friends with more students. And it was kind of for that reason as well, was just to connect with other students and to kind of build some of those friendships and relationships. And so from that, it was really about just trying to become involved with some of those different initiatives. And then when opportunities came up for the president position or other committees, I, questioned whether or not I should run for my first chair position because I was only there for a year, but I decided to go for it. And fortunately, I got the position. I think just because I had some of that fortitude and really explained why I thought I was a good fit for the position, and other students really bought into that and really saw that I was passionate about that. So just kind of putting that out there was really helpful. And then from there, it just allowed me to kind of grow my network a little bit more and to meet other students and do other things. And when people see you doing that, they kind of recognize the type of student that you are and what you really want to bring to the organization. So I think that really kind of helped propel me into that position.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about. I don't want to say I have a preference for ASHP or APHA, but my very first meeting was an APHA meeting, and I always go to APHA. I sometimes go to ASHP. But what I keep hearing is that people feel like if they didn't go to mid-year, their life as a pharmacist is over. And I believe that you can kind of help a little bit with that to maybe talk about some of the things that APHA does rather than, kind of the madness of mid-year and, where it can take you. So can you tell me a little bit about how your involvement with APHA is kind of fitting into some of the plans you're hoping for after graduation?
Yeah, definitely. So the reason why I really chose APHA at first, because I was completely clueless in terms of,
Okay.
what the organizations were when I first started. I really had no idea. I had never heard of any of them. But what I really liked about APHA was it that it was a place that any student could come who had interests kind of all over the place. So we had committees from anything from Operation Diabetes to IMP3, which was specific to our chapter, but that really had some involvement with the Board of Pharmacy as far as mental health services and things like that. So those were like, completely opposite things, but things that you could become involved with. There's also policy. So if you're interested in some of the legislative side of things and policy, APHA is great for that. And then there was also a lot of meeting opportunities or networking opportunities. So the mid-year regional meetings for APHA are a little bit different. So they're specific to students, but they're broken up into different regions around the United States. So you really get to meet a lot of students from the states that are near where you are. It's in a different spot every year. It takes place over a weekend. So that was really cool because we got to vote on our own policies, which did have a chance to eventually make it up to the annual meeting and be passed nationally. So that was really cool. Then the opportunity to kind of do some of those workshops and hear different keynote speakers was really good to kind of explore your areas of interest, which I think is really important because, a lot of times people don't know when they're going to mid-year exactly what their areas of interest are. So I think if you have a chance to really explore that, there's also a lot of mentoring opportunities with APHA, which is great because you get a chance to talk to some of the older students who have maybe gone through that or have seen some different things that you haven't gotten exposure to, which can be really helpful for you if you're trying to kind of figure out which direction it is that you want to go.
Okay. Something that was on the APHA open forum today was somebody sent a message about, I think it was vending machines or pharmacy vending machines in Florida. And the first kind of replies out were, oh, okay, well, that looks like it's going to help improve access. And we need APHA to kind of facilitate our talking to the legislators because it's going to go into legislative session in Florida. Can you kind of transfer a little bit to, it doesn't have to be APHA, maybe more locally with what you did with, is it John Forbes, I think is his
Yes.
name? Yep.
Yep.
You transfer a little bit, so something like that comes up. How can you become involved as a student, and then as a pharmacist, how would you kind of take part in that? Because it could maybe give better access to some people, and it could also be a threat. But I think the legislation and that discussion is meant to make sure that it serves the Iowans, or in that case, Floridians. But can you talk a little bit about how you would be involved with a policy issue like something like that, or pick a different policy issue?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different ways that I have become involved besides the internship. I'll start with that. So the Iowa Pharmacy Association puts on a legislative day once a year. It's usually towards the end of January. So that's a really good opportunity where students, pharmacists, and the Pharmacy Association have kind of a designated chunk of time set up in the Capitol where all the representatives and senators from the state of Iowa, you just have a chance to chat with them. It's kind of a break in their day as well to kind of bring forth some of those issues, especially if you look on your state legislator website, you can kind of see which pieces of legislation are going to be addressed in the session, which is really nice because then you can kind of talk to them specifically about that and see, they want to hear your perspective. They want to hear what you have to say in terms of how this is going to impact pharmacy, and they really want to hear how it's going to affect their constituents. Because that's really an important issue to them. And it's definitely something that I've learned they take very seriously when you're kind of the expert on the issue and you can bring a good point to them. That's something they want to hear. Another thing I've done is sent letters to legislators. That's always a good option as well. And a lot of times if you do that in kind of a pharmacy organization format where you have more than one letter being sent, it's really a good way to kind of get your point across or get them to recognize what you have to say and get things done that way. And then lastly, I could talk a little bit about my internship specifically. So John Forbes is a representative for the state of Iowa. He's also a pharmacist, so he takes interns every year. So it was a really unique opportunity. I was with a couple of other students. We would do a lot of the research for him on some of those policy issues that were coming. We would sit in on meetings with lobbyists and kind of talk about both sides of the issue and different things like that. So we got to give kind of the pharmacy or the scientific expertise in a lot of those cases and kind of address some of the issues that would come up during those discussions.
Yeah, I've actually gone downtown and talked to Senate President Jack Whitfer, who just happens to be where I live. He's in my area, and he explained funnel season to me. Can you explain funnel season to maybe people that don't understand the process? Because there is a time of year, I feel like, that is the very best time to speak to your legislator. And then the one thing he wanted to know, there was a couple of topics that came from Legislative Day. Should he support or should he go against? And knowing those two things, what time to contact my legislator and am I for or against a specific policy were the things that he really needed. Can you talk a little bit about how someone who wants to be involved can get with their legislator, when they would do it, and then how they would articulate for or against?
Yeah, so funnel week, and I apologize, I don't remember the specific date, but it does change, based on the calendar each year. But it's essentially when, because the House or the Senate, whichever is, comes up with a bill, they have to pass it by a certain time to get it off of what they would call the House floor and get it sent over to the Senate. That way that the Senate could either approve or deny that, and that way it could be voted on before session closed, which for Iowa is usually right around the end of April, last week of April, first week of May.
Okay.
Is when the session ends. So they typically would want to have those. It was usually a few weeks before that is when funnel week would be. The best way to honestly find out those specific dates during the session would be to contact either your state legislator or your state pharmacy association, because they're heavily involved, and they usually will have lobbyists around the Capitol around that time because it's just a very hectic time of year. But yeah, essentially what that means is if they do not get it off the floor by that date, the bill is essentially dead. So they really are trying to power through everything and get everything through that they want to for the session, because otherwise they have to wait until the next session to do so. So that is definitely a really good time, because before that, a lot of times you have time spent doing committee meetings and subcommittee meetings to discuss the pros and cons of each policy. And then you also have a lot of the research going on. So it kind of, sometimes it can move really quickly. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But during funnel week, you're kind of on an accelerated timeline, and people are really on top of things because, like I said, they do want to get through it before funnel week is over, essentially.
Okay. So let's talk about one thing that many students want to have, because it gets the most points on some of the rubrics that come for residency, but it's winning a national award or having a national leadership position. I won the Next Gen Award for Innovator, back in 2017, and then I came in third or whatever it was out of the three. But you won that national award for Next Gen Future Pharmacist. Can you tell me a little bit about how someone wins or gets a national award? So many people, want to have that on their resume, but it sounds like you just kind of do what you do and then people notice. But can you give any insight into how a national award works?
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations to you for winning that as well. It's definitely an honor. I would say for me, I'm very fortunate. Our school's dean, Renee Chestnut, assistant dean, Michael Nelson, really nominated me. It's kind of one of those things where faculty does a lot of the legwork in terms of nomination.
Oh, okay.
So they are definitely to credit for that initial step. They reached out and got me and nominated me, first of all. So I think from their perspective, they've seen a lot of my leadership positions in school. They've seen some of the things I've done, such as the legislative internship, which they really took notice of. So I think from a student's perspective who is kind of looking to get into that, definitely talking with your dean, assistant dean, or other professors, and just kind of making them aware of these different awards that do exist. Because I think there's a lot of other students out there that are definitely doing a lot of great things. They might just, might not get the nomination because their dean maybe isn't aware or isn't, doesn't think that what they're doing is going to be worthy of a nomination. But I definitely think there's a lot of good students out there doing a lot of those good things, and awareness would be big for the different faculty members and deans and things like that would be big. But other than that, I think for me, I really wasn't necessarily striving for any sort of national attention. I just was really trying to, do my best to advocate for the profession, to become involved and push the profession forward and advancing things. And fortunately for me, it was recognized, and I was able to win the award, which was definitely an honor.
Tell me a little bit about your kind of process for the future. I'm just hearing some people are getting interviews for residency. You're taking a little bit of a different route than going through the ASHP model, but tell me a little bit about how you've kind of planned for after Drake. Drake just happens to be the number two in terms of if someone wants a residency, they're number two in the country at getting it versus the other 145 schools. What what's the secret sauce? I guess is one way to ask it. But how what is your process that it's just going so well for so many students at Drake?
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I kind of alluded to earlier, I think going to Drake was, kind of unintentionally one of the better decisions I've made for myself. But they say pharmacy is a small world. I truly do believe that. And I will say everywhere I've gone, um, there seems to be Drake alumni. We have a very strong alumni network. When I'm out on rotations this year, um, everybody has spoken very highly of Drake students. And I think it just comes down to a lot of the culture. I think we have, a lot of faculty members who truly care about the success of their students, not only providing a quality education, but they want us to succeed after graduation. So I think they're definitely to credit. They work very hard. They're very good at what they do. And you can tell that they really care about the success of us as students. So that definitely is really helpful. I think the longevity of our university has definitely helped us. The fact that there's only two schools in Iowa and Drake has been around for quite a while definitely helps build that alumni network and build that reputation. And then the culture with the students. I think one of the things that also set Drake apart for me when I was interviewing, because I did interview with some other schools, but it felt very much like a collaborative or team-based environment when I was going through interviews versus some of the other schools kind of felt like it was, me against you or very competitive. And I think that has really paid dividends in terms of student success because we do a lot of team-based learning. We work in groups a lot, which fosters that kind of collaborative environment. And it's just the mindset that everyone wants to do really well and pick each other up at school. And I think that culture definitely is exhibited amongst students, and it's a very positive place to be, and everybody's willing to help each other out. So I think that has really just made a huge difference. And then everybody wants to continue that reputation. You want the next students to kind of have that when they go on rotations, they want people to say the same things about you. So it kind of just has continued that cycle of people wanting to continue to work hard and build that reputation.
Well, I've asked you a ton of questions. Is there anything you want to say that maybe that I didn't talk about, or any advice to future students, graduates?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing I have kind of struggled with myself. I've always been interested in some of the more non-traditional paths. And so for me, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out which direction it is I wanted to go. Tried to set my rotations up to experience a lot of different things. And I will just say to students like me who are maybe out there, or students who are still kind of undecided about what they want to do, I've really learned that you don't have to pick and go into one area and you're kind of in that specific area for your entire career. I've met a lot of pharmacists and a lot of students who have kind of been able to pivot or do different things, whether it be industry, association, residency, community pharmacy, different things like that. There's definitely not one path. And I've learned that as I've kind of gone through different things. And just keeping your options open, I think, is always a good thing, and just treat every opportunity as a chance to gain new experience that you didn't have before. I think a lot of times what I did as well was try to focus on the end goal, and I didn't always, take in all of the experiences that I was getting. And they definitely are very valuable, and there's definitely some teaching moments in everything that you do. So I would say just keeping that in mind as you progress. I know it seems very difficult at times, but it's definitely worth it and can help you see some different things.
Well, Drake Reiter, thanks so much for being on the Pharmacy Residency podcast.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
Hey, and if you're interested in learning more about the residency interview process, go to residencyhelp.com or amazon.com or audible.com and pick out 100 strong residency interview questions, answers, and rationales.